Lesson number 5, Transactions. Mga kaibigan, how is it going? In this lesson, we are going to learn what is a transaction? What are examples of business transactions? What is a transaction? A transaction, or specifically financial transaction, is an economic event that affects business resources and debts. Only financial transactions are covered by the accounting process. Other events not affecting resources or debts are somebody else's responsibility. It is an event where the business receives something and lose something. So we can call it an exchange of value for a value. So what is this something? Something can refer to the money, property, and other resources or service. What are examples of business transactions? In a transaction, the business receive and lose an item or item's value at the same time. You have to give something so you can get something. Here are some common business transactions. Let us discuss them one by one. Please take note, we are going to discuss only business transactions. So the first business transaction is the owner invested cash to start a service business. So the value received by the business is cash. The value parted with is ownership because it's a cash investment. Second transaction, the business obtained a loan from a bank for business use. The value received by the business is again cash. The value parted with is the obligation to pay. Obligation to pay the bank at a future date. Next transaction, the business purchased office equipment for cash. The value received, office equipment. The value parted with is cash. Next transaction, the business purchased office supplies on credit. When a business purchases something on credit, it means the item will be delivered, but the business will pay for it on a future date. So the business does not have to pay for the item immediately. So in this transaction, the business received office supplies. The value received is office supplies. The value parted with is the obligation to pay. Obligation to pay for the office supplies purchased on credit. Next transaction, the business completed service for a customer and received cash. The value received, cash. The value parted with is the service rendered for the customer. Next transaction, the business paid the monthly rent. Value received, the right to occupy the office space. Value parted with is cash. Next transaction, the business completed service for a customer on credit. So when I say completed a service for a customer on credit, the business has a collectible. The business did not receive the cash from the customer immediately. It will be received on a future date. Thus, the business has a collectible. So the value received is a collectible or a receivable. The value parted with is the service rendered for the customer. Next transaction, the business purchased goods for resale on credit. So the value received, the goods or the product. So the value parted with is the obligation to pay because the goods were purchased on credit. Next transaction, the business paid a supplier for goods purchased on credit last month. So the value received is the settlement of obligation, the settlement or the payment of obligation. The value parted with is cash. Next transaction, the business paid the salaries of employees for the month. The value received, of course, the employee's service to the business. The value parted with is cash.